Well, here I am with the 2026 BMW iX3. It's a new electric car on an all-new platform. And not just that, it's going to usher in a new era of design, technology, and a new approach to building cars by BMW. Now, it's a super important model. And you know what? There's going to be lots of videos showing you this car, but I want to talk about why this car is super important to BMW. In fact, if this car fails, it could be the end of BMW as we know it. You're going to be hearing the words Neue Klasse a lot when it comes to this car. Back in the 1960s, BMW was on the brink of collapse, and a new class, or Neue Klasse, of modern saloons proved there was a market for sporty executive cars. The 1500 laid the blueprints for everything that followed, and without it, there would be no 3 Series or 5 Series, or maybe even no BMW at all. Simply put, the first Neue Klasse cars totally saved and redefined BMW. So I guess you could say this is the Neue Klasse. But anyway, let's have a look at the design because that's what sells cars, right? I wanted to start at the back because if you ask me, some of the latest BMWs aren't actually that distinctive when you follow them, especially if you cover up the badge. But I don't think you're going to have a problem with this car because just look at how many elements jump out at you. The taillights, for example, I love how they stretch right across the rear of the car to emphasize its width. It's not a light bar, but you do have this sort of L-shaped element, which does recall some BMWs from the past. And I think these lights as well are really going to let you know what you're following if you're driving behind one of these babies. Aerodynamics are super important in this car, so you've got things like this tailgate spoiler and these fairings over here, as well as a rear diffuser, and they're all functional. They're nice to look at, but they also serve a purpose. But let's have a look at the side of the car now. I want to draw attention to this curvy line over here. It makes this car very, very voluptuous. But again, it's one of those things that looks nice, but is there for a reason. So it's curvy, and if you ask me, that's a kind of departure from the boxiness of the iX. But look at what else we have here. This is such a clean surface. It is kind of gentle radiuses, as a designer might call them. These door handles are kind of a new thing by BMW. Oh, they pop out when you need them to. And they are lit at night, so that's a nice and welcoming idea. And the whole reason everything is so smooth and clean is because the aerodynamics of this car are important. They're down to 0.24 CD, which BMW says is the lowest in this car's class. That's important for range, of course. When you're on the highway, more than half the energy you use is just for wind resistance, so that helps with this car's range. The way this car sits on its wheels is probably my favorite element of its design. These are the biggest wheels you can buy on the car, 22 inches. They start at 20. But yeah, I really like these. And by the way, these are designed to be aerodynamic as well. But my favorite view of the car has to be the front. I mean, look at all this here. Now, don't know if you remember this concept car called the Vision Neue Klasse X. If you don't, I'll put a link to my video of that car at the end. But I'm surprised at how much they've retained from that concept car. Look at these lights, for example. You don't see any chrome or metal at the front of this car. Instead, they've replaced it with lights for this grille, which, by the way, isn't actually a grille. I believe it's closed off. You've got these distinctive looking headlights over here, as well as this kind of edge that's spelled out with light. But of course, this is 2025, so this is going to come with a light show. In fact, you can choose from 3 different kind of lighting displays that welcome you to the car. I'm sure there's one like Knight Rider that kind of runs back and forth. In terms of the hardware, look at this element over here. There's kind of a valley that runs down the center of the bonnet, or the hood if you're American. It used to be the other way around. In the earlier BMWs, it used to be an elevated section that runs up there. So that's a nice inversion. And while I have you here, have a look at this BMW badge. It's now a matte kind of badge, and this flatter than before. So that's nice and new. And it does make me wonder. The first Neue Klasse from 1962 gave us some things like the first shark nose with the double kidney grille. It gave us the Hofmeister kink. I'm wondering what this car is going to give to future generations of BMWs. Okay, first impressions. This somehow looks like a BMW, but also doesn't really look like a BMW, but let's break it down. Now, when you get in, you do feel that it's nice and sort of airy in here. I think one of the reasons for that is you've got quite a nice low dashboard over here.
Really love the fact that you have full-size aircon vents. And the ones in the other BMWs have been getting smaller and smaller. They're completely useless, but these are godsend in weather like Singapore's, so thank you BMW. Lovely bit of woven material here as well. And I tell you what, they've removed nearly all the physical controls. I mean, you have a bunch here which I guess are super important, like the hazard lamps or the defogging. And you do have a gear selector here. I think that's important because you use this to choose between having a sort of normal driving experience or the one pedal driving mode. So yeah, it's good to have it here. Big pad for your wireless charging, a couple of USB-C charging ports as well. But I have to say, the thing that really catches the eye is this big screen over here and that long screen over there. That is BMW's iDrive panoramic system. It's 1.1 meters wide, pillar to pillar. And as you can see, it shows me all kinds of information. It's kind of cool. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's kind of looks further away from me than it is right now. That's because the screens aren't actually there. They're kind of reflected from screens that are down below. They've kind of corrected for the curvature of the reflections and stuff like that. So it's very cool. But what's extra cool to me is that it's actually customizable. So over on the right, you can have whatever it is that you want to have in front of you. So let me see if I can figure this out. Now, I am an older dude, so this might take me a while, but no, let's replace music with, let's say, altitude. If, for example, I want to know how high I'm getting. Okay, so there you go. You have 6 slots that you can play around with. And of course, that's going to be tied to your keys. So if you share the car with your wife, you're not going to have arguments every other day over like what should be there. This screen as well, I think, is much sharper and more responsive than the BMW norm, let's say. And they've kind of simplified the arrangement of all the tiles and things like that. This is BMW OS X. And as you can see, it does seem to work faster, and I'm hoping that they've made it sort of easier to use. BMW says they've used data from 10 million connected cars that are already on the road to decide how to make this easier to use. So one example of that is, I think if you touch this panel over here, they decided to put the blower speed up here because that's very often requested by customers, as well as the max AC, which is apparently a very important button in America. Screen size, I forget now, but I think it's either 17.9 inches or 17.3 inches, and I don't even know how they would measure that, but what's 0.6 inches between friends? Now have a look at this steering wheel as well. Look at the crazy shape here. And I think they've done this because they want to emphasize the fact that you don't have to look through this anymore. Now that you've got the iDrive panoramic, there is a more conventional steering wheel though, in case you don't like this one, and that would be the option that I would take. But overall, I would say that this car might be a little bit confusing to use if you're just not used to all this stuff. So that's my big question here. How easy will it be to use all this stuff? One of the things that they've done to try to make it easier is to have something called Shy technology on the wheel itself. So it's one button, one function, but apparently the functions only light up when that feature is available. But you know what? My takeaway is that this is what BMW has done in order to look and feel different. Like, how many electric cars have you seen where it's just a big rectangular screen over here in the middle? This is what it's like to look different, but not too different, because it still somehow feels like a BMW. By the way, guys, if you are finding this remotely entertaining or useful, be sure to hit subscribe. We're a pretty new channel, and that would really help us out. Thank you very much. So this is a family car, and it's worthwhile checking the back out very briefly. My first impressions are this is a nice place to be. A lot of that is down to this upholstery. I think this two-tone seat coverings that they have here are actually very nice. And my fingernails are actually quite happy with the quality of the plastics all around me. So that's good. There's a lot of space as well. You've got this flat floor, and apparently this has as much legroom as an X5. So I wonder what the iX3 is going to be like. A couple of aircon vents, I'm sure you can see, with my own temperature controls, USB-C charging ports, so I'm well set up for a long journey back here. Let's take a look at versatility. Now, I don't have sliding seats over here, but I can actually make these seat backs a bit more upright if I can only find the cable for that. Yeah, and that of course allows me to either sit back or create a little bit more room in the boot. do want to say though that I have to do that with a little kind of pull tab just like this instead of a proper handle. And look at this, I don't have map pockets in the backs of these seats. And even though I do have a panoramic clear roof, standard for electric cars these days, I don't actually have a cover for those sweltering days that we have in Singapore. So I think that if you want to look at any part of the iX3 where they obviously saved a bit of money, I think it would be back here. By the way, if you're wondering about the boot, well, it is rated for 520 liters. Now, that doesn't sound huge, but I think it is reasonable, certainly competitive. And you know what? Let me show you a neat trick, because you don't just get all this flat space over here. You get a nice luggage cover. And if you're wondering what to do with it, when you're going off on a long journey or something, you don't have to bring it up to the flat or leave it in the garage if you have one. It actually does have its own little stowage space over here. And of course I did it wrong, but let's keep going so that we don't annoy the cameraman. Let me put that in the other way. Let's do that one more time, shit. Let me show you something else which is quite neat. You've got a nice luggage cover over here, and if you're wondering like where it lives when you don't need it, well, let me show you. You can take it out, fold it in half, and it does have its own little compartment underneath the floor here, which I think is a nice little solution. Not a lot of cars do that, and one could say that this really is the difference between good and great. And yes, you're probably wondering, is there a frunk? There is. It's 58 liters, and it does have its own little lid to keep your stuff nice and clean. So I mentioned that this is the iX350, that means dual motors, all-wheel drive. You're talking about 469 horsepower, 645 newton meters of torque. So that's enough to launch this car from 0 to 100 in 4.9 seconds, so it is very, very quick. But let's talk about the boring stuff that you can't actually see, because all of that hardware has been completely redone. So this is what BMW calls its 6th generation eDrive technology. That means the motors, the motor controllers, they're all completely new. And so is the battery pack. Now they've gone to something called cell-to-pack design. What happened in the past was you had these kind of boxy prismatic cells that used to be assembled into modules, and then those modules would go into the pack. But now the batteries are actually like, well, they look like soda cans, and they basically pack them into a huge ass carrier. And that is very space efficient. So not only is each cell more energy dense than before, you can get more of them into the battery pack. The pack, of course, adds a lot of strength, so this car's body doesn't actually have a floor. The battery pack itself basically makes up the floor of the car, and that's another kind of efficiency. The bottom line is, those are things that can help this car get up to 800 kilometers of range, WLTP. And the energy consumption for this car that's this fast is something like 15 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. That's 20% more efficient than the last iX3. So think about that for a second, because that is what it really means to have Neue Klasse technology. So let's talk about charging. This car runs on 800 volt architecture. That's double the other electric BMWs, and the upshot of that is going to allow super fast charging. You can get 400 kilowatts into this baby, and that's enough to put in something like 350 kilometers in 10 minutes. Can you even get that kind of power in Singapore? Well, yes, you can. There's soon going to be a 480 kilowatt charging station opening up. So basically, it's not really enough time for you to even grab a cup of coffee. But fast charging is coming to BMW. Fast charging is coming to Singapore. So you're just going to have to learn to drink your coffee faster. Okay, now let's talk about driving this thing. Obviously, I haven't had a go in this yet, but it sounds promising because the weight distribution is good. It's 49% at the front, 51% at the back, and it will have a low center of gravity because of the battery underneath the car. Those are the basic ingredients that you have to get right? Because you can't really fix lousy ingredients with electronics. But speaking of electronics, the Neue Klasse introduces something called Heart of Joy. It's kind of a weird name, but it's basically the name for a supercomputer that controls all the driving functions of this car. What normally happens in a regular car is that you have an ECU, maybe for the power steering, one for the ABS brakes, one for the stability control, and they all have to talk to each other. In the Heart of Joy, that thing does all of the reasoning for this car, so it can do it much quicker. It can apparently process things at 1 millisecond, which is something like 10 to 20 times faster than a regular car. So it can basically calculate exactly how much torque to give you to maximize your traction. It can do things like provide this car with apparently the smoothest braking experience ever. The bottom line is, thanks to things like Heart of Joy, this car can think faster, and that means it can respond faster. So I think with the new iX3, we are edging closer and closer to the software-defined vehicle. Now, you know what, to be honest, a lot of electric vehicles feel very similar to drive, and the electric cars coming out of China are super competitive. So BMW really has had to try something different, and the Neue Klasse is what different looks like and feels like. It's not just this car, of course. This platform is going to support something like 6 new electric vehicles by 2028. As for this goes into production in 2026, and you're probably going to see it in Singapore with a product launch sometime in the 2nd or 3rd quarter of 2026. So everyone's going to have to wait for a while to find out how much the market likes this car. But it is a seminal car for BMW, so in the meantime, tell me what you think. Do you like it? Because BMW is definitely watching. As for me, all I can say is, I don't know if it'll be a success, but having seen all this, I can't wait to drive it. And yes, BMW, I hope you were watching that part too. .469 horsepower, 645 Newton meters, 549, I had it, sorry.